Well, good Tuesday evening, everyone. You've got the Pfeff. This is Bowling with the Pfeff. Thanks for joining us live on our YouTube channel. I'm Andrew Pfeffer. Happy to be here once again, sharing your unique bowling stories. And remember, we've got a chat window open right now. Please leave comments. If there's anything that you have a question about that we're talking about or just want to make a comment, please feel free to do so. If you're watching on replay, leave a comment as well. We'll catch that at a later time and be happy to get back to you. But to be the first to know when we start our live streams or post new videos, be sure to smash that subscribe button. It's in the lower right corner. It's like a little white box with a red circle in it, and that'll get you the subscribe link. Also hit the notification bell, and you'll be the first to know. So let's get on to our first frame tonight. And we're talking about bowling siblings. You know, a lot of people have siblings that bowl, some don't. My brother never got into it. I have a younger brother. He worked at a center for a while, but never really got into serious bowling or competition or anything like that. I love them all the same, though. But there are some great sibling duos out there. You know, I think of Dale and Dave and Daryl Traber, Darren and Michael Tang, Nick, Lauren, and Josh Pate from Minnesota, Jeff and Rob Piroshad, and I'm probably missing some great ones. If you can think of some that I didn't mention there, feel free to leave them in the comments. But regardless, you know, we want to know, and we're assuming you're a bowler in this. Do you have a bowling sibling? Let us know. Leave it in the comments. We'll catch up later in the foundation frame and roll those out along with any questions or comments you might have for anything that we say in our show today. So let's move on to the beer frame. And our beer frame guest is coming to us from Wesley Church, North Carolina tonight. His name is J.J. Schuh. He bowled in Wisconsin. He's a Wisconsin native, bowled for UW-Oshkosh, and is now one of the most well-known people in North Carolina, right? Right up there with Roy Williams and Coach K.
Of course. Yeah. Of course. Yes. Thanks for having me, Pfeff.
Hey, it's my pleasure. You've been challenged twice to be on this show, and we're glad to finally get you on. It looks like you've got some friends and family that were interested in taking a look, so I don't want to make you nervous or anything. But why don't you start out by kind of telling me what you've got going on behind you, because you've got some audio-visual elements there that we should probably know about.
Of course. Well, first and foremost, obviously never to take a backseat to anything is the brick, as referenced in the write-up, which is for the traveling brick for the conference champion.
Yeah.
And so we just were talking. I don't know where it is currently, but it's out there somewhere. And
one of life's mysteries, really.
Right, exactly. Somebody's the lucky recipient of that. So, but also there's the picture of the cavern from Reeve Union where we used to bowl and host the different, the Titan Invite for one, where we had the conference meets and whatnot over there too, which I don't think is even standing anymore, or it's at least redone without a bowling alley.
Right. Yeah. The bowling center, I think they ripped out of there several years ago.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. How about the jersey up top there?
Tony Bennett, pride and joy of UWGB, University of Wisconsin Green Bay, that was drafted by the Charlotte Hornets. I figured what better time to pull out a jersey from way back in the day than now.
Yeah, a great connection between where you've been and where you are. And then over your left shoulder, you've got a jacket.
Yes. My parents bought me a PBA Tour jacket way back in the day, and I took to adding some of my junior league pins from throughout my junior league bowling days. And there's my prestigious 220 game pins on there and 240 games. And so, yes, I'm very proud of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, when we started out with this, we were talking about bowling siblings. So we should probably ask about your bowling sibling.
Yes. I mean, my whole family bowled. It was a family affair. And I pretty much grew up in the bowling alley, but obviously, namely one being my brother, who was very successful, went into regionals, had pretty good amount of success there, into the tour and whatnot. Back in, I think Jason Couch was the rookie of the year, the year that my brother started into the tour. So Two lefties, obviously, but yeah, obviously very integral to starting off and getting into the competitive side of things a little bit more than just a Saturday morning wake up and go and meet up with your friends and bowl a couple games.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're coming to you on Groundhog's Day.
Yeah.
And, I mentioned when we started chatting back and forth about this, we got to know, did you see your shadow this morning?
We did not.
Okay.
And so, yeah, 6 more weeks. And ironically enough, as you mentioned, how, the weather down here in the Charlotte area is much nicer maybe than up in the Midwest area. Believe it or not, we actually had a couple of flurries today.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Zero accumulation, but there were a couple of flurries in spirit of Groundhog's Day.
So you've got people who are probably wondering when we're going to get back to spring because nobody likes flurries, least of all people in Charlotte, I would guess. So, okay. So I bring up Groundhog Day because, in sync with what I, asked about your brother, because back in the early 90s, I was, let's see, how old was I in this picture? Oh, maybe 14. That's my guess. And in the background there is a guy named Chris Gibbons. If you're familiar with the movie Groundhog Day, there is a scene that's in a bowling center. And for a very short second, you can see a guy throwing a ball. And that guy is Chris Gibbons. So why am I telling you all this to you right now? Well, this tournament was at Spectrum Lanes in Maple Grove, Minnesota. I've actually mentioned it before. I think on the show, certainly on the page. So this particular tournament was the first time that I had ever heard of your brother, because your brother was in it. He did fairly well in it, and if I'm not mistaken, he may have even won it. Do you remember anything
I
about
do not.
that?
You're probably going to hate me for it, but I don't remember. But I'll say it's a testament to his success throughout his bowling career, being that I don't know of all the titles or anything that he's won throughout the years.
Sure. That was a regional tour stop, and that picture's from the Pro-Am, which I was in. I remember not being able to get the bowling ball to wrinkle. It was totally different from anything that I had ever, experienced in junior leagues or anything like that. But
you were playing the one board, though, right?
Oh gosh, of course. But, at a little different angle than I did at UWM. I just kind of pointed it up to the pocket. So is there anything else that we should know about your brother, Rob? I mean, we know he's a bowler. We know he's had success. But was there anything that he did or said that kind of influenced you, either, getting into bowling or kind of as you grew in the sport?
I mean, everything from mindset, walking into a bowling alley, to the technical side of adjusting, and furthermore, even into bowling balls and the layout and, what ball to use for what condition and things like that. Very, very knowledgeable of all the ins and outs of it, of course. And still, to this day, I have a fraction of what he has in his, tip of his pinky. But he's solid. I mean, the guy from a bowling perspective didn't miss. You mentioned siblings, the Dale and Dave Travers. I mean, those guys, and Walter Ray, they're referred to as dead eye. Those guys don't miss. And I kind of categorize Rob in that same tier, in that he's always right there. And it's spares, obviously we talk about that, and it's just his head game from an adjustment standpoint was second to none, in my opinion. And obviously that was inspiring for me to try to grasp even a smidge of what it is that he knew, and how to go about that. And still to this day, the little bit of bowling that I do, I use a lot of those, cardinal rule, a thumb, where whatever it may be, from equipment standpoint or just adjusting, or you name it. And so obviously I had a lot of respect for him and admired his game.
Yeah. Great to have all that knowledge right there in your immediate family. So let's get to your story, and I need to start by asking if JJ stands for something. Is it JJ, or does JJ stand for something?
Jason John.
Jason John. Okay.
Only when my mom's yelling at me.
When you're doing something wrong, right?
Never though, right?
No, never. Never gets used. Where does bowling start, and how old are you? How old and where do you start bowling?
Gosh, it's a good question. Like I mentioned a little bit ago, I pretty much grew up in a bowling alley, and ironically enough, where Blaze was doing his interview from Electric City, it was previously known as the Bowling Bar, and so just a tiny little house where, gosh, I don't know, maybe 12 lanes, and it's kind of ironic because I heard Ben. I think was maybe talking about growing up in a smaller center, or maybe Ed. I can't remember, but yeah, just going for junior leagues. My mom was a coach for junior leagues, and so even when I was too young to bowl, I would always. I have a very vivid memory of riding around a little like car, just kind of pushing it like Fred Flintstone style. Just I was that kid that was always running around in the bowling alley. Didn't actually bowl at that time, but I mean, I was probably 5 to 6 years old ish. And I was bowling on the side, but just not obviously officially in a league at that point. But just I was always surrounded by it. And so obviously then too, traveling around to the different tournaments, and my brother was bowling at that time. My sister was bowling in Wisconsin Scratch Bowlers Tour. I think it was the WSBT or Wisconsin Youth Bowlers Tour, WYBT, way back in the day. I know you're aging myself, but yeah, they were both very involved in that. And so it was a weekly weekend affair where we were kind of traveling to the different tournaments and obviously the junior leagues. And my mom was very involved with the junior program at Village Lanes in Little Chute. But I was just immediately kind of exposed to it from day one.
You need to get that?
Sorry. I thought I turned off all my devices. Not even my phone. It's my kid's iPad.
Oh, no way. No. So at some point you start getting into this. You start getting a rhythm. You're achieving things on a junior level, and you want to start taking it to the next level to become, to get into tournaments, to get into competition. What at that young age kind of tells you that, maybe I've got a shot at, competing against some other people my age?
There again, it was kind of fun going around, and especially as you get into bowling more and more, I think any bowler or anybody that's had any experience bowling, when you're involved and you're around other people bowling, you get that itch and you want to bowl, And so as I was just starting out bowling myself a little bit, as young as I was, still just being around that tournament atmosphere and competitive atmosphere of bowling, it kind of got the juices flowing a little bit. And then just with experience and time throughout junior leagues and whatnot, then there was the Round the Valley tournaments that were always at Super Bowl and 41, I think it was 41 Bowl. They were kind of sister centers in the Appleton, Greater Fox Valley area. They had those, and it was, you could win scholarship money,
Yep.
So it was, obviously my parents had a vested interest in that it helped everybody, right?
Right.
I won if ever I was able to win any of that. But it was just one of those things where it kind of snowballed. It was fun. It was something where, as you're getting more experience and involved in the game, it was becoming more and more a thing. And I enjoyed it. It really was a family affair, dating way back to my parents. They were always bowling on, I think it was a Friday night or Saturday night league. And I would do the same thing that I was telling you, just kind of go along with them and just witness it. And not necessarily just sitting there watching bowling. I was still a kid running around, of course, but just being exposed to it. It was just something that it kind of grew my interest in it over the years.
Sure. I love this picture that you provided me, the one from junior leagues, because you've got you on the upper left there, and the guy leaning over right here, Kyle Blasey, would later become your teammate at UW-Oshkosh. What are you doing in that picture?
Oh, God only knows. That was our, I believe, end of the year banquet of some variety. That was 4 of the 5 members of our travel team. I'm trying to think of even who the 5th member was, but That was it was almost like the traveling team for that we would go, and you bring up a good point where that was kind of the bridge to where junior leagues on Saturday mornings, when you showed up and just threw a few games with your friends, graduated into a little bit more competitive atmosphere, where then you were going to the different centers in the immediate area and bowling against. So not saying an all-star team per se, but it's the bowlers that are a little bit more involved and more serious about bowling, other than the other junior bowlers. And so it was just one step up or level up in a competitive nature, and that certainly spiraled things into a little bit more of a the tournament atmosphere and things like that from there. But that was at a banquet where I don't know where we finished. I can't see if that was if we ended up winning that or what, but it was just like Junior Leagues 2.0.
You won something. There's something.
A little hardware there. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, there's something you were proud of there. At some point, you end up in the Wisconsin Scholarship Bowling Club, which is a series of tournaments that kind of went throughout the state. Was that in high school, or were you college age by then?
Oh no, high school, definitely high school. Yeah, there was, and there again, there were a couple different tournament circuits, if you want to call it that, at that time. Wisconsin State Youth Bowling Association was one then. That was kind of like the Wisconsin Youth Bowlers Tour. Just kind of, I don't know if it was renamed in the same thing or what. Can't remember that, but yeah, it was just there again. We're taking the radius and expanding it a little bit more. Other than in that Fox Valley area where I was just talking about the traveling team, for instance. Now we were doing more statewide.
Sure.
And it was just one level up in competition, which was better yet. And obviously that helps all around as you get more experience in the game too.
Yeah. Do you remember any of the guys that you competed against in that? I mean, I was in there. We kind of crossed paths a little bit, but
yeah.
I mean, who was dominating at the time?
Todd Filter. That name I remember. Todd Filter was always doing very well. And I was still young. He was a little bit older than me. And so I was just the young pup, didn't know any better, and get my butt kicked around. But at the same time, it was good for experience. But yeah, Blaze, I think, bowled in some of that. Dave Rowan, who I know is probably listening and who was blowing up my phone on purpose a second ago. I'll call you up. Yeah, some of the guys that I befriended over the years, just in bowling in the immediate area, we had a pretty rich pool of talent in that Fox Valley area that extended beyond all the way up through the state. And so a lot of the same guys that you saw around home, you would see the same faces in some of the bigger tournaments outside of that. So I was very fortunate to have that crop of people to bowl and compete against. That was good for my experience, of course. And, you surround yourself with talent like that, and it helps you kind of, you can watch what they're doing from an adjustment standpoint, seeing what balls they're using. All of those things it's a copycat sport, just like anything, right? Where you see what's working, what's not, and you kind of you develop your own, habits, or I guess just techniques resulting from all that.
Yeah. I noticed that Dave shared our link this afternoon, and that he had said that JJ Schuh is clobbering the competition, an inspiration and legend. I mean, these are my words, but if those words don't get you extremely curious to watch this, you clearly don't know JJ. Is there anything we should know about you that this is kind of thing between the lines? No, nothing at all.
Nope. You'd have to censor half of it. I'm kidding. No, we had a good old time back in the day. I mean, obviously, all of this, bowling in general is a great sport to have the ability to, have a couple of beers with the boys. Not only from, of course, when you're old enough to drink and in adult leagues and whatnot, but then throughout college, of course, we've had our times.
Yeah.
It's just it's a fun environment, and it seems like a lot of the bowlers in the bowling society share a lot of the same type of interests, and we just have good old fashioned good time. It's just fun. And so yeah, it's I would say that that's probably what he's referring to.
No,
In a PC way.
you make a great point, because it's like, if you don't know people in a league, you get into a league, you just kind of mesh, because
Mhm,
we've all come from similar backgrounds, maybe not
mhm.
exactly the same, maybe not competing against the same people or in the same states, but we're all passionate for the same reasons and driving after the same things.
Agreed.
Um, so uh, after you start getting into tournaments, you're bowling WSBCs, you decide you're going to go to UW-Oshkosh. Why do you decide that school in particular? Was it
Wow.
because you were from that area?
It, for the most part, I would say that at first it was a location. It was convenient. Um, I didn't even know Blaze, and obviously Blaze and I, we connected even to a higher level. And him and I, to go back for a second, him and I were in junior leagues together. Obviously in the traveling team, but we even bowled on the same team on our Saturday morning league for a number of years as well. But I didn't even know Blaze was going
Wow.
to Oshkosh at that time, and I hadn't picked up a bowling ball at that time for quite some time. And gosh, I don't even know how it got brought up or how I realized that there was even a bowling team. I obviously growing up, I saw my brother when it was an NCAA sport at that time, and his team Saginaw Valley was doing very well, and that's in the larger formats. But I didn't even know Oshkosh had such a thing, and it was a club sport there, but nevertheless, it was something that intrigued me as soon as I learned about it. And then on top of that, knowing that Blaze was part of it, obviously we reconnected after not having really been, hanging out or anything for a few years. Just kind of out of high school doing our work thing, starting our careers. Um, but yeah, it was something that was very surprising to hear, but very happy to have found that. And the Oshkosh team meshed pretty well, as aside from that, with all the other Wisconsin teams and Minnesota teams and whatnot. So I'm very, very glad that was brought to my attention.
Yeah, absolutely. You had mentioned in that picture behind you is from Reeve Memorial Union,
Uh-huh.
where you guys hosted tournaments. I'm assuming you bowled leagues there. What do you remember about Reeve Memorial Union? I mean, for those of us who only got there maybe once, twice a year,
Mhm.
I guess we're probably taken by the fact that you've got kind of a faux stadium seating kind of look. But what should we know about how it was to bowl there regularly?
Oof. Um, Here again, I'll have to make it PC. Um, I would say, kind of going back to what Ed and Ben were talking about with you last week, all the unions in all these campuses, all these colleges that we competed at for, whether it's invites or conference, um, invites, whatever it was, the conditions were brutal. I mean, you talk about coming from a house shot, whether it be in junior leagues or if you bowled a little bit of adult leagues prior to college. And it's a whole different ballgame when you go to these unions that don't have people that are well trained, maybe, to operate oiling machines or whatever, or heck, if they even have one. Sometimes I felt like they were just taking ketchup bottles and squirting oil out wherever they please. Um, Ben was talking about reverse block. I mean, some of these, you don't even have names for these oil patterns. It
Right.
was such a, it was a challenge. But I would remember the most just the difficult conditions, and that's not even talking about Madison. I remember was brutal, and that was a very difficult house to bowl at. And there were a couple especially, but they usually did a pretty decent job there. But it was still difficult in a step up in difficulty from your ordinary center that you would bowl in other leagues.
Yeah. And each of those unions were a little different. They were
Mm-hmm.
maintained differently. The lay of the land was different. Some were old, some were newer. So it was definitely a challenge that you don't really. Not that college bowling now isn't challenging. It certainly is with sport conditions, but it seems like the resources in some of the community centers are different, we'll say, than
Yes.
they were in the union houses. So when Kyle had kind of talked about this a little bit, but in these club teams, we don't have a coach. We don't have a way to decide you're on the first team, you're not, or even in the heat of battle in the middle of a tournament, if you brought six, who's
Mhm.
sitting and who's not. So how do you decide that at UW-Oshkosh?
When I first started off, it wasn't as organized as it maybe was when we ended. And I think Blaze can attest to the fact that we're pretty proud of the fact that we left it a little, we I guess helped organize a little bit more throughout the years. But it was more just kind of a free for all, whoever, and I think maybe it was Ed also talking about when he first started not having a full team and still traveling around. Very similar. And, not only are you going to face the challenges of whoever not being able to make a certain tournament for whatever the case may be or whatever, but then also trying to figure out hierarchy of skills into who's going to make the team, who's going to be an alternate, what is the order of the team going to be. And at first it was just kind of, plug and play, we didn't really know any better. And as the years progressed, we started doing a little bit more of a qualifying type of thing when we had more of a selection and quantity of bowlers to choose from, where then we maybe would have an alternate or two. And I think it was more or less, I was lucky being that the team that I had with Oshkosh all throughout the years, we were pretty close knit and we all got along very well. There wasn't any kind of inter team drama. And for the most part, we all felt, I guess, kind of in line with where, the lineup should be, when it was, where it was, who should be bowling, etc. But the majority of us, I think, had a pretty good basis as to skill level and where everybody should be placed in the lineup from even just the adult leagues that we were bowling outside of that. And granted, we would still tinker around a little bit and rearrange as need be, with especially, like Ben mentioned last week, also the hot hand. It's case by case, tournament by tournament basis. Who's bowling well and who's struggling, and that goes to the extent of who should be bowling at all, or we should bring in an alternate. Or my hot-headed nature would, if I'm not bowling well, I need to take a break. So whatever. But yeah, it was something where we, over the course of the years, started becoming a little bit more organized with not qualifying per se, but in a way, having to be a little bit more of a structured situation where we would determine who was the starting five and who was an alternate. And not only that, but taking a step further, what the lineup should be as well.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. When you bowl in Wisconsin, you bowl in conference. That's kind of the first little goal, is to win the conference for the year, or as they do now, win each individual tournament on the way to winning conference for the year. What year did you start, your first college competition? What season was that?
Boy.
And what was it like to, kind of get into the bowling in the Wisconsin Collegiate Bowling Conference for the first time?
It was a whole new world. And like I said, I not intentionally necessarily stepped away from bowling at that time, but it was just, going to school at that time. There wasn't, and then moving to Oshkosh, I didn't really know anybody. I was just kind of going with the flow, and bowling balls were not, they were not moved from where I lived back in the Appleton, Kaukauna area. So to be honest with you, I can't even remember what year it was that I started bowling in college. Blaze would probably be able to tell you better than I would. But yeah, gosh, 95 I know is still in youth.
Okay.
So then I'm trying to think how many years. Either way.
I was going to say my last year was 99-2000, and I know you were in it then, and at least another year or two after that, right?
Yeah. I think we kind of overlapped 2 years worth or so.
Right.
But yeah, it would probably be somewhere in the 90. Well, so 98 is when I graduated high school. I would say it was probably in the early 2000.
So maybe 98, 99-ish.
Yeah. Yeah, shortly thereafter. I went to a tech school out of high school, so
Oh,
probably
okay.
early 2000s
Sure. Okay.
after I transferred.
Um, so in 99, 2000, at the end of the season, and, this is totally self-serving, but, UW-Milwaukee won the conference.
Mhm.
And at some point, the people in the conference
Hmm.
procured, acquired, harvested a traveling trophy. Now, this is kind of a trinket that is, I'd say it's maybe a little more substantial than Paul Bunyan's axe. Not quite as substantial as, let's say, the
Lombardi
Stanley
Trophy?
Cup.
Yeah.
You know, so we got this brick, this trinket that you have pictured right next to you.
Okay.
It went in our college house, and our lease was up at the end of the spring semester in 2000. After that, it went somewhere. Can you pick up the story from there? Do you know where it went?
No, and this is a perfect situation or opportunity, I guess, to see if anybody out there is listening to find that thing. Obviously,
Yeah.
I'm mistaken it because it literally says the traveling brick trophy on it, and that's a good question. So we should definitely see if we could locate that because I know it was still continued past Blaze and my tenure, at least for a couple of years. I can't remember where it ended up.
Okay.
But yeah, it was very coveted.
Because you guys the year after ended up winning.
Mm-hmm.
These are some of the artifacts that Kyle was goodly enough to produce photographic evidence of.
Right.
So I would assume it would have gone to you. And Stout said when they won, it was kind of in their trophy case somewhere. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, maybe it's going to be a mystery, but it was definitely a point of pride for those of us
Absolutely.
20 plus years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and we will not discuss how it was acquired initially.
Of course not. It was
No,
harvested.
that's
Harvested.
a good way of saying it. I like it.
Like a deer hunter would.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Um, in 2002, you won some kind of a singles title at ACUI at Bolero. Do you remember
I
any
do.
of that?
I do. Yeah, and the qualifying. I forget what school it was. Was it Milwaukee or what? The ACUI is the acronym. The NIT of bowling, as we refer to it again. I forget where the qualifying level was at, but that's where what Ben was mentioning last week. Also, where I shot a couple of 300s in the block to qualify for it, but then it was at Bolero in was it Wawa or wherever it was. Yeah, in Wisconsin, of course. Of all the years that I qualified for, it was right in Wisconsin, but I could have got a little travel time away otherwise. But anyway, yes. So a little podunk Oshkosh boy bowling with a lot of the big guys. Yeah, I remember, ironically enough, that, and I fared well, but ironically enough, in the championship, I was bowling against, I forget the guy's name, from Moorhead State. And the ironic part about that is that's where my sister went to school and bowled, as well as my brother-in-law, and that's where they met.
Wow.
At Moorhead State in Kentucky. And coming full circle, I was bowling against a guy in the championship from that school, which you just don't happen to hear that school's name too often. And there I was. But yeah, that was probably one of the bigger highlights, I guess, of my bowling career from just a championship or a title standpoint that I had under my belt.
Oh. So what happened with the match with the person from Moorhead State? Did you win?
I finished second. I think I lost by like 3 pins or something. It was crazy because it was a format. I'm trying to think. I think it was a 2-game comprehensive score, but I think it was close. I know I'm almost positive it was single digits.
Okay.
But I did lose by a few.
Okay. So at some point between when you finished college and now, you moved to North Carolina.
Yes.
Why'd you move to North Carolina?
There was a career opportunity down here. My brother-in-law and my sister and their 3 nieces were down here, and just sick and tired of that cold weather up there, right? But no, I decided to take the leap of faith, and try a career, and so gave that a go. But in the meantime, didn't even pack my bowling balls to kind of correlate it to what we're talking about here. And I moved down here in 2008.
Okay.
And I didn't pick up a bowling ball for the first maybe 2 to 3 years at least, if not maybe 5-ish.
Okay.
Just not as big of a sport or anything that people do down here as much as they do up there. And so it was just something that I didn't know anybody in the environment, and so it was just kind of unfortunately on the back burner.
Yeah.
So to kind of bring you up to speed with how I got back into it, one of the guys that I met through work and was training and actually became pretty good friends with over the years and still am, mentioned one day while we're riding around in the car that he's in a bowling league on Thursday nights. And so I said, well, that's crazy. I bowl, and you don't hear that too often in just casual conversation. So he asked me if I could sub one night. And so I called my parents, and they basically overnighted my bowling balls for the most part, and got a few of them down here, and just started back into it. I ended up becoming a regular on that team and made great friends with all the guys that I'm still friends with today, very close friends with, still bowling with them. Yeah, and I don't know if Lonnie Downs is watching, but one of the times that I didn't even have my bowling balls down here, there was a party of some variety that we went to bowling alley just for a function, and his bowling ball fits my hand. And so I still didn't have my balls down here at that time. So we were just, goofing around and bowling with friends for like a birthday party or something. And I ended up shooting a 300, and I hadn't picked up a bowling ball in God, 5 years, give or take, whatever. And so there was a little bit of a thirst after that, of course. You want to pick it back up, but there was still that interval of time, even after that party, that I didn't really know anybody in the bowling world down here, community. And so after I was presented with that opportunity to sub for that one night, then that kind of brought it all full circle and got me going again.
Wow. What is it like then in that area to bowl either in a league competitively in that kind of environment?
And this is with no offense intended towards anybody down here.
Okay.
There's more activities to do. Of course, the weather allows for that. So I think that is a correlation to maybe bowling not as being a prominent of a thing. But there's very good bowlers down here. I just would say there's not as many of that level of good bowlers as there are in the Midwest. So again, that's not to discredit or belittle the skill level of people down here. It's just that it seems like it's either you're doing it purely for fun, going out and having a beer with the boys or girls each week, or there's the other level that are taking a little bit more competitively. So you still have that interaction and that competitive nature if you wanted to find it in leagues. I would just say there's not quite as many as you would find up in the Fox Valley.
Sure. You had mentioned that you're either carrying or carried a 236 average and shot 840 something. Were those recent figures or?
So it was a couple years ago now, but given the whole pandemic, and I know that you've been talking to some people about how that's affecting bowling, and we'll maybe get into that. But yeah, it was a couple years ago, and then it became, as anybody can probably testify with kids, becomes a little bit more of a challenge bowling on weeknights, and helping kids with schoolwork and things like that. It starts to interfere a little bit, and that it's just something where you got to make the decision once in a while. And so I scaled back a little bit from the amount of times that I've bowled over the last year and a half, I would say. But that was 2 years ago when I was more heavy into it, I guess. And then the last season that I had right after that, I stunk. But yeah, I would say that the 2018 year was probably the best year that I averaged and consistently shot.
Wow. You shared that picture with us. I kind of like that one. What's going on here besides the obvious lily in the background?
Yeah, it was just an outing, with the kids. I take them every Saturday to just do various different activities, and bowling comes up on occasion. And I thought it was absolutely hysterical. He didn't obviously know the true meaning of what he just accomplished in this picture. Yeah, I had to do a double take, and yeah, sure enough, he went up and threw it, and without bumpers, mind you. The ball, being 6 pounds or whatever, trickled around, and the pins were flopping around, and what was left was that beautiful lily. And so I told him he better stand at that foul line and wait for me to take a picture for his very first official lily. But yeah, I thought that was, I had tears rolling down my face after seeing that. And obviously just me being there with my kids, they didn't know. They had no idea what I was really, laughing so hysterically about. But yeah, I definitely shared that one.
Yeah. Do they just do it recreationally, or are they in junior league or anything like
Yeah,
that?
no, so far just recreationally, especially, given the current times, it's a little bit difficult to have any kind of consistent activity and, in any kind of organized sport or whatever. But yeah, it's something that's actually come up over the past, I would say, year or so that both of my kiddos, I have a 11-year-old now, girl, just turned, and my son's 5 years old, and both of them in casual conversation at one point or another recently mentioned that they wouldn't mind getting into it a little bit here and there. And so who am I to say no? I don't want to stop the tradition now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned the pandemic, and like I've said on many of these, when that all happened last spring, those of us in bowling had a decision to make. Why don't you talk about what went into yours, and did you decide to continue or kind of rear back for a while?
So my reasoning and approach to it was a little bit twofold in that the pandemic hit and that affected my kids and the schooling, of course. And so it trickled down. So it wasn't necessarily a direct correlation as to whether I was comfortable or not going to a center and bowling, but more so on the homeschooling and the virtual learning side of things. And that it's just, there's a lot more going on throughout the course of the day where you're trying to juggle two kids, their academics, and then obviously trying to work at the same time. It's just a lot. And so it became a thing where I kind of tapered off a little bit, and that's where that last season was a little bit more jagged as far as participation. I wasn't an every week guy. I was more subbing when available, and that's kind of what I'm current day doing right now, still until we ride this thing out. But from a comfort standpoint, I'm all for it. I have no problem walking into a center and bowling. What they're doing down here is, they stress masks being worn. Does everybody wear masks while they're bowling? No, but more in the common areas, they suggest or recommend that. But it's, for the most part, it's the same fun environment, same bowling, competitive, semi-competitive, but fun environment. But there are some people that haven't resumed or continued. And this is a men's league that I bowl in, and so there's a wide variety of ages. And granted, who's more vulnerable and whatnot. So you naturally are going to have some people that are a little bit more cautious about it, rightfully so. So current day, I'm not every other week per se. The team, unfortunately, that I was bowling with regularly, when the pandemic hit, we kind of not dismantled. One of our guys moved away. He's in Augusta, Georgia, who happens to be the guy that I told you that reintroduced me to bowling once I moved down to Charlotte. His name is Justin, in case he's watching. But him and his brother, Zach, Lonnie, I don't know if you know Lonnie Downs, if you heard that name, good guy. And then, Ronnie and Sean, all these guys, we kind of just, for the time being that there was so many moving parts with who was going to be able to make it and not, that we unfortunately just kind of took the year off. I don't think we're saying indefinitely that we're not going to get back together and do it, but just given the certain times right now, it's kind of on hold. And that's why I'm just subbing whenever possible when I have holes in the schedule that I can fit it in, as well as anybody that needs me.
Sure. And is this the Lily League that you were talking about?
So the Lily League is more or less just from social media perspective.
Okay.
Nobody is safe from the Lily League. That can be in a junior league, it can be in a women's league, it can be in a men's league, it can be a scratch, handicap, you name it. All we do is, from this society of people who are involved with it, anytime you see a lily, and that goes with anybody, yourself included, anybody watching, you see a lily, you take a picture of it and you hashtag the Lily League. And heck, tag me in it, whatever you want. But either way, it's kind of more or less a league that is not a league, but from a social media perspective, posted. We post pictures.
A virtual league.
Yeah, it's a virtual league. There you go. That's a good way of saying it.
Yeah, and is this? You said this is predominantly on Facebook, not Twitter or anything like that.
Not yet. That's a great idea. I mean, get it out there. Any kind of social media format, I'm all for it.
Okay,
get it going.
Yeah, I was in one of my last leagues. I was bowling with I want to say he was the treasurer or president or something like that, and he'd give everyone a hard time for leaving it, and he ended up leaving it twice in the season. So I've got some pictures and video for that. So
nobody is safe. Absolutely,
I'll be able to contribute for sure.
Yes.
As you may have seen last week, Ed, one of our guests, said that you never heard the ball hit the lane when you threw it, that you were so smooth. Is that something you worked on, or was it just natural?
I guess that was more natural. I appreciate you saying that, Ed. I'll take it as a compliment. No, I mean, it just kind of goes back to a lot of the reps. It's not anything that I was focused entirely on, is wanting to not have that, or have it be a smooth release or something like that. In fact, sometimes, you almost want a little bit of a loft. If we're pulling at some of these unions and we're trying to get through burnt out heads, you maybe want to get it down the lane a little bit more. So I would say to be quite honest with you, that's something that in my mind, I think about, if like I said, the burnt out heads in the front part of the lane, if it's really dry, maybe I'm going to try to loft a little bit more or something like that. But to have that memory of me I'll take it as a compliment. I appreciate that, but it's just a lot of reps, I guess, and testament to my brother working a lot with me throughout the years when I was growing up, and my mom, for that matter. Not to discredit her efforts as well. She was a great coach.
Sure. No, that's huge. I mean, I wish I could do that. I'm more of a lofter. I can dank it off the heads a little more than you could back then. So let's move on to the foundation frame. I see we do have a couple of comments here.
Uh-oh.
So one of them is from David. JJ is a Wisconsin legend, arguably the greatest product of Kaukauna since cheese. Now I know that Blazy lives in Kaukauna right now, so this kind of speaks to him directly as well. So I guess, how would you react to this?
That's a bold statement, Dave. I mean, Kaukauna has Simon's cheese, which is now an international company. So that's a bold statement, and I take that as a great compliment. And needless to say, Dave is not. Well, I don't know where he's living now, if it's Appleton, Menasha, whatever area, but yeah, he's a good player himself as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then my buddy Joe from the Utopian Baseball universe always talked about Pete McCordick's 300 on TV, so it doesn't surprise me at all that he's mentioning the McCordick's baby, because that's definitely his thing. I gotta ask, I mean, is there any chance that we see you back in Wisconsin, either on visits or moving back someday?
Definitely. I made a home down here. I have my two kids, and so I would say from an indefinite standpoint, moving back, probably not. Mm-hmm. I will absolutely be visiting at some point. It's been way too long, and heck, it'd be a great opportunity to, or it'd be great just to get a bunch of guys together and see one another again, whether it be on the lanes or just having a beer with everybody. I miss those days greatly. We had a lot of fun. There's a lot of good memories from those days.
Absolutely.
Blaze and I still talk about it to this day with, different little nuances that we've that we remember from different tournaments and whatnot. So, but yeah, you'll see me back there eventually, and by all means, we should definitely coordinate. Where are you staying now, Hef?
Yep.
Are you staying? Are you in?
I'm in Altoona right now.
Where is that?
That's right next to Eau Claire, so it's basically like a suburb. It's the two things Altoona has going for it is it's got the railroad going right through it. I believe it's the Union Pacific Railroad, and it's the home of Fuzzy Thurston.
Fuzzy Thurston. Okay.
And he was on the Lombardi Packers. He never played football here. He played basketball here, but made his way to the Packers and made quite a name for himself. And I should double check here. You're still a Packers guy, right? You haven't gone over to the Panthers side of things?
No doubt.
Okay.
I will. It's sacrilegious to not be a Packer fan.
Yeah, absolutely. So at this point in the program, we do something called Off the Sheet that you've seen on those previous episodes, where I ask who you think would be a good fit to interview on Bowling with the Fef. So JJ Schuh, who would you like to challenge to be on the show?
I find it hard to believe that El Presidente Rory Holland has not made an appearance on this podcast quite yet. So I think he definitely needs to come on and talk about how great he is at tripping fours and remaining anonymous with his profiles on different chat rooms with that handle. So Rory Holland, you definitely need to get your butt on this, and you can tell your wild gym stories about some of the prank calls that we did back in the day in the hotel rooms, and oh man, there's some times. But yeah, Rory Holland needs to be on here. I
agree. No, totally. He'd be a great one. And Rory, if you're seeing this, get a hold of me on Facebook or bit.ly/bowlingwiththefef. We'll find a day to have you on the show. JJ Schuh, been a pleasure. Thank you so much for accepting not one, but two challenges.
Appreciate that. It's been an honor, Fef.
Yeah, and joining us today. No, fantastic job, great stories, and great memories from the old days. If you're interested in doing the same, let me know. It's Bowling with the Fef on. We have a public Facebook group that JJ helped inspire me to put up, and it's got about 60 some members, still growing. If you like bowling and things like that, feel free to join up. Also bit.ly/bowlingwiththefef to apply to be on, or you can email me at bowlingwiththefef@yahoo.com. Our next show is coming up Wednesday, February 10th at 6 p.m. Central. We've really got a great month of interviews scheduled, not only with JJ, we've got a couple of Wisconsin Hall of Famers coming up next week. I've got a USBC Hall of Famer after that, and a PBA Hall of Famer after that. So lots of great stuff in February, and interesting things that I'm working on past that. So stay tuned with us. We've got lots of great content coming up. Other than that, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm Andrew Pfeffer. Be just and fear not, and we'll see you again soon.